Today we have with us Anson Dorrance, one of my greatest coaching mentors and good friend. And I'm just it's an honor to have him here. The reason he's here, I mean, there's so many reasons I could say, but one of the really big reasons is because that what's kind of led me to this point to be involved in a club and start a club and build what I'm building. And one of the big influences on that is this man right here. So having Anson with us to kind of talk through some things, I think is really important. I think it's very fitting. Not only does he have an incredible wealth of knowledge from his own experiences and all the things that he's done in the game and in life, he has kind of come up with some different ways of looking at the game, I think, and he was implementing these for many decades. Some different approaches to player development and things that inspired me as a younger coach, and then continuing through my career to eventually be hired by Anson and work at the University of North Carolina with the women's soccer program that I've learned from him. And so that is a core part of what we do at NC Rush Central, the new club. And it's something that I'm always going to do and that I want to continue to help bring to future generations. And I also like to put my own spin on things too. And so that's why Anson's here today. And I think it'll be important for you guys to hear more about him and about his approach and philosophy and some of his experiences. Anson, we were just kind of reminiscing. We were catching up a little bit on the year that I came into the program at University of North Carolina, and then we were able to win the national championship in 2012, and there were so many awesome memories from that standpoint. Now we're going to kind of take it back, and I know some of this, but I'd love for these folks to hear it and more soccer families to learn more about the insights kind of behind the scenes. When was it and how was it that you started, Anson, to kind of figure out your approach and how you needed to or maybe wanted to approach player development in soccer specifically? And as you were doing this, who are some of the people, some of your influences, some of your mentors, or the folks that you kind of looked at and started to model some of the concepts that you were coming up with that eventually became your main foundation and your core method?
Yeah, Jason, I appreciate that question. First of all, it allows me to pay tributes to the people that impacted on me. And honestly, a huge coaching influence for me when I was hired as a very young coach. I was so young when I was hired at UNC. I coached guys I played with.
Yeah.
And of course, now people forget I wasn't hired to coach women at North Carolina. I was hired to coach men. So when I was brought in 1976, I was brought in to assist the guy that I played for at UNC, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Marvin Allen. And I was brought in as his head coach designate, which meant I was going to be his assistant for a year. Then the following year, I was going to take over. So I could basically do the recruiting. I could get my feet wet because my only coaching resume before I was extended the chance to be Marvin Allen's assistant at the place I played was in the Rainbow Soccer League. And of course, some of the people on this call will certainly know all about Rainbow. Well, I always enjoy it when I'm giving a coaching presentation because I get to tease everyone in the room about how I went from coaching in Rainbow Soccer to the top of Division One. Because a lot of people, have this incredibly circuitous and painstaking route to end up, at an elite university, and not me. I literally was basically a lieutenant for Kip Ward, who was the visionary behind Rainbow. He was this hippie that I loved. We played soccer together at UNC, and he had this idea of having a coeducational recreational soccer league for all ages. And his hippie philosophy was we were not going to keep score, but we were going to have fun. And as a result, sure enough, we had an incredible amount of fun in Rainbow. And obviously, the thing I've got to communicate to everyone on the phone is that's got to be the core reason why we play. Let's play basically to have a good time. Now, I would be disingenuous if I didn't share with everyone on this call The way I approached Rainbow is his philosophy was not to keep score. And back in the old days, I coached an elementary school team for Rainbow, a middle school team, a high school team, and then I played on the adult team. And I would find the best athletes playing basketball. I would scholarship them, which means I would pay the Rainbow soccer fee for them. And then we went around just beating everyone to death. And it was wonderful for me. And I thought this was a marriage made in heaven because the other hippies in the league were also not keeping score. I believed in keeping score. And I enjoyed I enjoyed teasing all of them since they could care less about the score, and my team did like the score, and we really enjoyed it. Our morale was higher when we won. So basically, poor Kip Ward had to put up with this warrior, this competitive psycho that basically was now a part of his league. But I love Kip. I love my coaching experience, and then I love the chance to coach at UNC. And so for me, my coaching philosophy was built on three different platforms. And I'll share them all briefly and obviously open up to give you more detail.
Yeah.
The first platform is the competitive call room. And when I was a young coach, Dean Smith would invite me to watch his practices. And honestly, this is an extraordinary opportunity for me. He was an absolutely brilliant man, and I loved everything about the man. I loved certainly his success as a coach. I loved how organized his training environments were, but I also loved the way he treated people. And what was really cool is I was absolutely nothing and nobody. And he would invite me and my staff in to watch him work. And to this day, I can remember I got to my first Dean Smith practice. And for those of you on the call that don't know who Dean Smith is, he was Michael Jordan's college basketball coach. He's one of the greatest collegiate basketball coaches of all time, and he's an incredible man. And he would invite me in to watch his teams practice basketball. And the thing that was interesting is we had to sit in a certain part of the gym, and then a manager would walk up to us, and then on a piece of paper, down to the minute, in huge detail, would be what was going to happen in his practice environments. He followed the script to the letter, and I was so impressed at the time because, of course, when I ran a practice, I sort of had a general idea of what I was going to do, and then I would muddle from one part of the practice to the next. And all of a sudden, Dean Smith is handing me this piece of paper that literally had it down to the minute. And every time there was a change of venue for where you were in the court, the scorer's table would hit a button and a noise would go off, and you could see all the players sprinting to the next platform that their training environment was in. They sprinted to water, they sprinted out. I mean, everything was done at sprints between the sessions. And the other thing I noticed early was underneath every basket was an assistant manager with a clipboard. And that clipboard would be a record of what happened at that environment the manager was recording. So if it's a free throw environment, your free throw shooting percentage was recorded. If it was mid-range jumpers, that was recorded. If it was a 3v3 event on half court, the wins and losses were recorded. If it was 4v4, 5v5 full court, those games were recorded. There was so much detail in the practice and so many different things going on. If the 2v2s, the bigs were underneath the basket, you'd be recording how many box outs, how many putbacks, how many rebounds. Just every single detail of practice was recorded by all these assistant managers. At the end of practice, Dean would have the 12 gentlemen that were on his team get together, and you would see all the assistant managers sprint to a scorer's table. There at the scorer's table, the head manager with a calculator, and not the calculator we would have on our phones. It would be that thing you would see your accountant use. They would be recording that day's practice data. By the end of Dean's address to the gentleman on his team, he would turn around, he'd grab the sheet of paper from the head manager. And what had happened at that table is the manager had, with all the data he was given, had assembled that day's practice performance. So if it was a 12-player roster, the first four guys in terms of evaluation on that practice could leave and shower immediately. The next eight guys would be lined up on basically the end of the court. And it's the old suicide thing in basketball, which is free throw line and back, middle of the court and back, other free throw line and back, end of the court and back. And of course, the next four guys would just sprint until they were exhausted. They would leave. And the last four guys I assume we're sprinting until the end of recorded time, and I
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. I love the accountability of it. I love the data-driven element of it. And so I stole it, I soccerized it, and I took it to a new level. That stuff is called the competitive cauldron. And the thing that distinguishes me, so much so, I was telling this to Jason just a minute ago, the Celtics, the reigning NBA champions, had me speak to their coaches last fall because it's extraordinary how many different people across the country are curious about our cauldron. I can remember in the summer of 2004, I was at the White House with the national championship team, and one of the President Bushes was honoring all the Division I national champions. And I am there dressed to the nines, as are the young women on my roster. And all of a sudden, I could see this white haired guy fighting his way up the line. And all of a sudden, he gets in front of me. He extends me his hand. He says, Coach, do you know who I am? I said, I'm sorry, sir, I do not. He said, my name is Pete Carroll. I'm the football coach at USC, basically the reigning national champions in football. And he said, we use your book to coach our football team with. I'm thinking to myself, you are kidding me. So basically the Trojans from Southern California are national champions because of the stuff they got out of my book. And I said, that's extraordinary. And then all of a sudden he's competing in Charlotte after the summer was over, and he invited me down to be on his sideline so I could be honored for my contribution to their success. And I told him I had a conflict. We were playing against the University of Miami when he was there. And I said, Bud, I'd love to come out to Seattle because by this time he was a pro coach, and I'd love to watch you basically train your team. I wanted to see how a football coach used the ideas that we had in our cauldron to coach his football team with. And he said, Anson, I'm sorry, my team's not very good this year. We'll never make the playoffs. And then all of a sudden, I think he gets rid of a linebacker, and all of a sudden he's in the playoffs. So I fly out to Seattle, and all of a sudden I get to see this thing he calls Competitive Wednesdays. And what it was the basically the O line against the D line in the red zone. It was the first team quarterback against the second team quarterback. It was the running backs against the linebackers. It was the receivers against the D backs. He was recording everything in practice, just like we do, just like Dean Smith did. Now, these are, aggressive NFL athletes. And so every now and again, you see a fight break out because, of course, the athletes knew that this was being recorded. And I was thinking, this is absolutely extraordinary. So
Oh
I
yeah.
think the thing that makes a difference in the environments where I coach is to make sure everything's extraordinarily competitive. I'm saying this right now, but I'm also going to share with all of you the fundamental reason your kids should be playing is because they absolutely love it. So all I'm talking about right now is how to get to the highest possible level. So I had no issue, coaching in Rainbow. These kids were all rec level players. And I understand that, yep, I would, sort of recruit in order to win everything. But for me, the critical foundation still has to be your enjoyment of the game. So even though the cauldron is something that we use to try to elevate these athletes to get to the highest possible level, I don't think that has to be the bottom line if your kid just enjoys sport. So please don't be misguided when I am sharing with you that foundation for our coaching evolution.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, or kind of with that, a lot of that I've taken over the years. I know many other coaches that have done this. We kind of have taken the design of that, the ideas, and you can adjust and sort of tweak the way you're doing that to provide something at the youth level that is a little different. Because I think, and you can kind of speak to this. Um, some people I've noticed over the years will assume a negative connotation to competition for one. And the other side of that is they will then believe that the data, the objective data being gathered, is somehow used to put players against each other. But it at its highest level, it's actually designed to help you, I believe, unlock your best potential should you choose to do that. And it provides a framework, which you have explained to me many times, that I don't think a lot of people understand, which is by providing the number, that some data that is objective, you then put yourself, you remember you call it you and the player against the numbers. So
Mhm.
now the feedback you guys are getting as soccer parents isn't just a coach's opinion of how something should be done. It's actually, hey, let's look at what's happening in these certain key categories. I think you could be better here. Do you agree? Right. And then the conversations change. The coach becomes the teammate of the player to try to improve these numbers. It's not an indictment on your son or daughter, and it doesn't mean that they're less valuable, in a team or something. It just means that that's a different way of looking at it to try to help them understand and then you and the player will like team up on that, and that's helping them and guiding them on their improvement, you know. So could you speak to that a little bit? I know it's not a
Yeah.
question, but
No, no, no,
just an
that's
observation.
good. You're absolutely right. So the way we should look at this this is feedback. The trouble with the teams that I coach is usually I try to have between 26 and 30 players at every practice. Ideally, just like in the Dean Smith environment, you should get feedback at the end of every practice. Because of the format with Dean Smith and his managers, they got feedback at the end of every practice. They could actually look at their data right after practice because the head manager had compiled it. What we do at UNC is we try to have, 6 to 8 analytics people that basically record everything that happened in every session. And then they email it to them that night. So their feedback is immediate. So the first way to look at a data-driven environment is with feedback. This is feedback. The other way to look at it is basically it's going to be you and the athlete against the data. So I try to meet with these kids formally 3 times a year. And what Jason described is absolutely spot on. It's me and the player looking at the data, and I am telling the player that I think you can be a lot better. And here's what I would recommend you do. So the nice thing about the data, you have a starting point to try to help a young athlete decide where the athlete's going to spend time. So this helps them out a bit. And obviously, there's a solution for evolution in any area. And one of the best things about player development is process. So, what do you do to get better? Because obviously, one way is the recreational, I guess, way to get better. And there's nothing wrong with this methodology, just to play. Play and play and play, have fun, play in the backyard. Heck, play against your mom and dad as a player. Get in the backyard and, play 2v2, the two kids against the mom and the dad. Set up, a tree as one goal and a bush as the other, and just go back and forth if your yard's big enough, or go to the elementary school down the street that you can all walk to. I mean, there's thousands of different things you can set up to basically enjoy playing the game. So yeah, we can all evolve as players by just figuring out ways to play and get better. The thing about data-driven environment is you can specifically drive particular qualities in player development that can be certified with data to show you different ideas on what you can do in your playing platforms and your process to get better. For example, if I could make 2 suggestions for player evolution, and this is for almost all levels, is to live on a wall and to play 1v1. If you basically just shot the ball up against a wall, for 10 minutes, 3 days a week, within a year or two, you would be at a completely different level. Because, first of all, your leg strength would improve dramatically, but so would your skill set. If you shoot a ball up against the wall, the first thing you've got to do is to retrieve the ball that hit the wall. So now what you're working on as the ball comes in is your first touch. And as you get better and better and better, you can start to play 2 touch against a wall. You can play 1 touch against a wall. And a part of the philosophy of a wall ball is to knock the absolute garbage out of a soccer ball to generate power. And this is going to assist in the construction of using both feet, left-footed and right-footed. So if you could spend time 3 days a week, 10 minutes a shot on just living on a wall, you'd be shocked at how much better the young player will get. The other thing that everyone should do is play one-on-one. Obviously, as a parent, if you're still capable, play against your kid. Play them 1v1, or have them play 1v1 against their friends. And so those are things they can do on their own. Live on a wall, play 1v1. Those platforms can make all the difference in the world.
Can I say to that too, and that was coming into some of my other questions, like, one of the biggest things I learned from you was, number 1 is design. Like, things aren't happening on accident. Like, you really are very detail oriented and you spend a lot of time designing practices and designing your whole season. And the other thing is the decision, because I think that that's where people are not being properly guided all the time necessarily, which is that ultimately for a player to be successful they have to decide, they have to make a choice. Could you speak a little bit about that, because I think some of the stuff we're describing is part of how it helps a player eventually make that choice, right? Because we want to help you make a choice to be the best you can be, but can you speak to that? Because it's like I see players where we can tell them, like, we can prescribe to them so many things to do, right? But then what is ultimately that switch that gets flicked where it's like they're actually going out and doing these things, like some of the great players that you've coached that have eventually like made a decision, because they didn't just become great
Mhm.
just because they were talented, right? They actually had to make some kind of choices along the way.
Yeah, well, the most famous story I tell about that is the Mia Hamm story. So I live near Chapel Hill High School, and there are two different ways I can get into work. One is I can take Sewell Elementary School Road down to Estes Drive, hit it, make a left, hit Martin Luther King, make a right, and right after the police station, make a left, and now I'm doing side streets until I get to my office. That's probably the fastest route, but I don't always go that route. Every now and again, I'll take Sewell to Estes Drive Extension. I'll make a right rather than a left, and when I make that right, I look for my first left, and now I'm actually driving through Umstead Park, a small park, and it's much more scenic. And every now and again, I'll take that route just as a change of pace. And this particular morning, it's February. It's kind of cold out. And all of a sudden, I'm driving through the park, and out of the corner of my eye, I can see this figure going 5 and back, 10 and back, 15 and back, 20 and back, 25 and back. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's our fitness stuff. And I pulled over to see who it was. And sure enough, it was Mia. This is the second semester of her senior year. And I was so impressed. I, without her even realizing it, I drove into work. I scribbled a note to her. I dropped it in the mail and I forgot about it. 10 years later, after Mia had become world famous, she wrote a book called Go for Goal, and she sent me a copy. There in the breastplate of the book was the note I had written her. The vision of a champion is someone who is bent over, drenched in sweat at the point of exhaustion when nobody's watching. And this is the core of what Jason wants me to share with everyone on this call. Basically, the players that become extraordinary don't become extraordinary just by attending practice. Everyone attends practice. So there has to be a separator. So what I wait for is I wait for that moment when all of a sudden a player gets it and starts to do a lot of extra stuff on their own. For ball mastery, for fitness, like Mia was doing. And then the most exciting thing for me as a coach is for me to watch one of my kids ascend to the highest possible level, to play in the Olympics or play in the World Cup and then win a world championship or an Olympic gold medal. But I can remember those moments when I realized they had made the choice. And so Jason's certainly going to set up training environments for everyone. They're going to be great environments. How do I know this? Because he worked for me and I know he's really good. And if the only thing you're going to get out of this is by having fun in practice, by the way, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I tell this to my kids all the time. I mean, if your calling is to cure cancer, trust me, that's so much more important than, winning a gold medal in the Olympics or winning the world championship. So if you are going to spend times in other areas, I mean, certainly your academic work is going to be more important. I mean, there's so many other aspects of your life where you have to take those parts of your life very seriously. This, I guess, thing that we're going to talk about together here has to be fun. As long as it's fun, then you can decide who the heck you want to be. And so the data-driven approach is going to put you in a position to see how you compare with the people around you. Then if you're at the bottom of a list, You have to decide basically, do you want to be at the top of the list and how you climb it? And this is where your association with your coach and what you decide to do to sort of climb that ladder is going to be very, very critical. And this is where Jason's insights and the stuff you can do on your own can take you to a completely different level. So for me, I love everything about sport. In fact, when Jason and I got on, there are only two things I absolutely enjoy other than hanging out with my family, and that's reading books and playing sports. And so now I can't move very well anymore, so I'm left with pickleball. But I certainly read everything under the sun. So for me, nothing wrong with being a recreational athlete. But if you want to go beyond that, then commit yourself to what you're doing outside of practice. Ball mastery, striking balls over distance, certainly in our game, heading the ball effectively, but also being able to beat someone off the dribble and stopping someone off the dribble. And there are 1,000 things that Jason can tell you how you can improve in those areas outside of practice. But let me get into go ahead,
Yeah.
Jason, and I'm going to
Oh,
get
I was
into.
gonna say, and before we go and you finish the next thought, and then we'll go to questions, is Mia when she was dating Carrie Zavagnin, because I know I obviously work with boys, girls all over, and I try to help folks understand the benefit on the women's side of being able to play with and against the boys and how that can progress and help their careers as well. Could you talk about that a little bit? Because I know at Carolina, obviously, we have boys that play with the girl. It's a built-in platform that we've done really well with and that you've kind of pioneered, I think, in a lot of ways. And so I just wanted you to speak to that and maybe share briefly the Carrie Zavagnin Mia story. And
Sure,
then you say whatever you need, and then we'll go to questions.
sure. Well, what I loved about Mia was basically her ambition to be the best. And she came in like she was shot out of a cannon. So even in her freshman year, I think she scored 20 goals and had maybe 10 or 12 assists. And her sophomore year, maybe a couple more goals, maybe 22 goals, maybe 14 assists. But her biggest year of improvement was the year she dated Carrie Zavagnin. And I think it may have started late in her sophomore fall or maybe in her sophomore spring. Because what was interesting is Mia was incredibly competitive. And what I really enjoyed about her was watching her compete against the Wagner 1v1. So when I started this conversation earlier and we talked about, live on a wall, play 1v1, I am very serious about this. If you play 1v1 on a regular basis, your game is going to skyrocket. Because if you have the ability to beat someone off the dribble or stop them off the dribble, your game's going to go to a completely different level. So I used to spy on Mia when she would be playing against the Vagden 1v1. And Zavagnin, because my office was literally right next to the field at UNC, I would see Zavagnin defending a regulation goal. So, of course, it's, 8 yards wide and 8 feet high. Mia was defending a traffic cone. Zavagnin would beat her like a drum. He would never let his girlfriend win. He would beat her like a drum. And every now and again, you would see Mia kicking that traffic cone up in the air because she was so competitive and it just drove her crazy that the Vagnan's defending basically a massive goal and she's defending a traffic cone, just really frustrated her. The next year, after 2 years in a row of about 20 goals, she went up to 32 goals and 35 assists. What do I attribute that to? I attribute that to her playing 1v1 against, by the way, Zavagnin ended up on the U.S. full national team.
National team player, by the way, guys.
Yeah, so
Eventually,
this,
so he was decent.
yeah, no, so this wasn't an ordinary young man. This was a young man that not only ended up signing a pro contract, he became one of the best players in the United States. And
Absolutely.
so that training environment for me, it took her to a completely different level.
Well, and you can do that, guys, on the boys' side too. I mean, you can play against older players. That's why players with older brothers or older sisters
Mhm.
generally can perform not as a hard and fast rule, but in general, seem to become even stronger players. Because those are the environments that as when we look at player development that we're trying to create. Because if we genuinely want to help you improve, I mean, these are really good nuggets here. And the people that do those things usually improve and greatly compared to their counterparts that don't do the same thing.
Well, let's open it up,
Yeah.
Jason, because I'd be curious to see what everyone
Yeah.
would like to uh, ask of me, and I'll certainly share it with them. If it's an elite player, play as high as you can. If the kid has skill sets, let him go. If he can't navigate it, then don't let him go. But the only way for a kid to improve is to make sure he's the worst player on the field. Then he's
Mhm.
going to improve. One of the greatest things about environments where girls can play with boys, that's the way these girls improve the fastest and the most. And obviously, you've got to be careful sometimes when you throw a girl in with boys. You got to make sure it's not a toxic culture, because yeah, a boy can hurt a girl, but a boy doesn't have to hurt a girl. Back in the old days, before the NCAA restricted the number of games we could play in the spring, we would literally play a different boys team from Raleigh every Monday. And here's the way it went. The first Monday, we would play a U14 boys team. These are my college girls. And these are kids that, sometimes we had just finished winning the national championship. Now we're playing against U14 boys. We would almost always beat the U14 boys. The next week, we would play against the U15 boys. Now, I would be the center back. So at least, I could dominate every ball in the air. This is back when I could still change directions, and I could organize them from the back. Against the U15 boys, we would win one, tie one, lose one. Then the following week, we would play against the U16 boys. We never beat them, ever. And I would be the center half. I'd get a guy off my men's team that would be the center back. And one of my starting center forwards off the men's team would be my center forward. And the U16 boys would still beat us to death because they're just quicker, faster, blah, 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 blah. But if you want to see something that's immensely entertaining, watch a U16 boy play against a college girl, because, of course, these boys are intimidated socially by the girls, but they can just run past them. And it used to just amuse me to watch my young women get so frustrated, basically losing to their younger brothers, every single time they played against them. But as a result, back in those days is when we were winning national championships every single year. And I know that was one of the reasons why. So yeah, play up. If you're a girl, play with boys. If you're a young boy, play at the highest possible level you can. Now, obviously, Jason's on the call. I hope this doesn't get him in trouble. But
No,
base,
no.
but basically, what ends up happening in most youth clubs, they're so desperate to win, they play their kids in their age group, especially if they're dominant. So you take a boy that could normally play on the U16 team as a moving traffic cone, and the club won't move him up there. They'll leave him at a U14 level, because at a U14 level, he will dominate. And then the winning, because obviously a lot of these youth coaches just try to figure out ways to recruit, that's not developing the player. So what has to happen if you want your kids to develop it into becoming elite is they've got to play at the highest possible level, but they have to be on the field. So they shouldn't play up if they're a reserve. In other words, if a U14 boy is playing on the U16 boys team, he's got to be on the field. Otherwise, he should stay at his level. So whenever you move up, you've got to get on the field. One of the biggest problems I have with my college girls is they all think they're going to step in and start in the NWSL, which is our pro league. No, they're not. Certainly not their first year. So I tell them, you're not good enough to start in the league. And then some team drafts them, and I'm telling them, no, don't sign on that team. Go to Europe, play on this team, go to Australia, play on that team, go to, South Korea. In other words, go anywhere where you can get on the field. No, 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 no. Of course, they're all experts. Of course, they're all being driven by their parents that want the glory of jumping into the league. And they end up sitting on a bench. And then finally, after sitting on the bench for a year or two, they get fed up with it. And they called me and I said, yes, go play at this lower level team. You're going to be on the field, because the most important thing for any player at any level is to play.
Play.
So that's the
Yeah.
most important thing, get on the field.
And that's the levels within the levels too. I mean, there's really no black and white, hard and fast, like, rule on any of this stuff. It's that's why it's so important. And that's what we do here. So easy to tell you. This is my philosophy. I learned it from some pretty good people too, is you have to care about the individual. I think that's the main thing. You have to get to know your players as people, and then you start to help guide pathways. That's kind of the difference between gatekeeping and guidance, where I see a lot of clubs fall short is they want to be the gatekeeper to your ability to go play the sport. I think the people who do the best job are the people who guide you. They get on your side and they open the sport up to. It's not my job to stand in your way of playing soccer. However, I also want to make sure you're being honest and you're being actually real with those kids. But in order to do that and help those families as well, you kind of gotta. There's a bit of deeper understanding and process of getting to know each other, and that is very important. If you really want to do that, because to Anson's point, every case is a little different. Some players might play up, but again, they're only playing up on paper. They're really just sitting on a bench, right? And so you have to figure these things out. Other questions? Anybody else would like to jump in
I
there?
have one. I'm
Yeah,
Ethan. Sorry, I don't know if you remember me. I
I
played.
remember you, Ethan.
Yeah,
Of course. What are you talking about, dude? You're all growing up. Look at you. How old are you now? 32, 30?
yeah, no, 14.
All right, cool. What's up?
Yeah. I was wondering what the pathway to becoming a coach would be.
Oh, Anson, I'll let you start with the pathway to becoming a coach, and if I have anything to add, I'll add.
I'm the last one to ask. My dad wanted me to go to law school. He was an oil businessman. He was building three 30,000 barrel per day refineries in Morehead City, North Carolina, in Savannah, Georgia, and in Jacksonville, Florida. So he wanted me to be his corporate attorney. The family joke at the time is if I was his corporate attorney, at least I wouldn't have a tendency to steal from my own estate. So that was my family humor. I loved my father. I was a dutiful son, so I went to law school as a favor to my father. I hated every single day I was in law school, but in order to contribute to my family income, because my wife was basically supporting me, I got married the summer I graduated. So I was offered the job to replace the coach I played for, and I was making some money, taking a course shy each semester in order to go to law school. And then one spring, in my third year of law school, the AD said, Anson, come out. I want you to look at this women's club that is petitioned for varsity status. I went out there and I said, after watching them play, yeah, they did great. Let's make them a varsity. I'll share facilities with them. I'll share practice fields, stadiums, et cetera. He said, Anson, if you'll coach both teams, I'll make your part-time men's position full-time. And I said, fine. So now I'm coaching the men and the women. I'm trying to get a law degree. I have 6 courses to go, and I'm getting 4 to 6 hours sleep at night. And finally, I come home one day and I said, honey, I'm so sorry. You're not going to retire on a yacht in the Mediterranean. I've decided to coach. My sweet wife said, you are so happy. Let's be happy together. So I had no interest in coaching.
Well, I will tell you this on the other side of that. I knew kind of I wanted to be a coach when I was about your age, Ethan. I was 15 years old. One of my coach at the time, Randy Hansen, who is an amazing coach, ended up working with the women's national team, was one of Michelle French's and some of these other folks, a good influence to them. He's a great coach. He was my club coach at the time. He asked me after a game at a tournament what I thought I wanted to do with my life. I was 15. I said, I think I want to be a coach like you. I had just actually volunteered at a boys and girls club soccer camp and I really loved it. And I just wanted to be around sports, man. And I knew soccer and so when I told my coach, I think I want to be a coach, that coach, he told me, come back at this time because we're at a tournament and I want you to scout this game with me. And he immediately started asking me questions that a coach would need to know and kind of mentoring me. So I think if you want to be great at anything, especially coaching, particularly, you want some mentorship. You want to seek out people that have had experiences. Then I was really fortunate because over the years of other people I met, Anson, I had read his book, Training Soccer Champions, when I was 16 years old. I had always watched the University of North Carolina play women's soccer on television every college cup. I rooted for them very, very much. I met Anson in 2003 at a soccer game at the University of Washington, and I got up the courage to talk to him and ask him if there's anything I could do to learn from him. he told me that I could come to bring my girls team to a soccer camp here in Carolina. So like you just have to be willing to kind of put yourself out there a little bit, find some people that you can model some of your stuff after so you can kind of start to learn some of those things. And if you're a young coach, there's a lot of good community service options for coaching. You can get jobs at camps eventually, especially if you get like your first aid and CPR card, stuff like that. And then you just keep doing it. But to Anson's point, think about that as you grow through the process. This isn't something you do if you want to retire on a yacht in the Mediterranean. But if you're happy living a nice life in Chapel Hill, then it could be for you. But I know you personally. I know you're smart enough and capable, and you know the game. You are one of the smarter players that I know that I coach. So you have the potential to do that, and you enjoy it. So if that's the case, then yeah, you just kind of follow that and utilize the mentorship options, and we'll help you. Like, I'll help you. You're one of my former players. Of course I will help you, so that's important. Like, the people that you're around, they can help you out. But that's a great question. I had one actually I didn't get to ask you yet.
Okay.
We kind of covered a few different things. I think we've kind of covered it indirectly, I suppose. What what is your what is the coach, like, when did you, maybe for more of a personal side of this, like, when did you really realize the impact that you think that you could make? Like, when you're coaching the sport, like, I don't know if this was the case for you, Anson, necessarily, but I think there's this time, and I know you've said this before, like, coaches want to accumulate drills, but eventually you realize it's about more than that. And it's like, I know I went through that process as a coach where eventually I realized, I want to coach the game, like I just told Ethan, and I want to be part of the game, and I want to keep coaching to be around the game. But there was a point where I realized that it's about so much more than the game. It's almost about everything else. Like, was there any moments like that for you, or could you speak to that as well? Because our job isn't just like coaching the game. It's like we're working with people through the game, and and I've had those moments where I've realized that. Have you had any
Mhm.
moments along your career that stood out to you that you realized something?
Yeah. So there's an evolution all of us go through when we coach. And I think at first, and this, I really appreciate that young man's question because at first you're wondering if you're any good. And of course, the easiest way to measure that is, winning and losing. But of course, that's not the way to measure it. But when you're young and you don't have any experience, like when I started coaching, I didn't really have any experience. Um, the question is, can you coach more than the game? And what ends up happening when you're a collegiate coach is you eventually, as soon as you're convinced that you have some, I guess, value in helping a player become a better soccer player, you make the transition into what your real job is all about, which is the evolution of helping someone become a better human being. There are a lot of words they use for this kind of evolution. They talk about transactional relationships where I'm a coach and the relationship you and I are going to have, it's going to be transactional. I'm going to help you become a more skillful player and you're going to help me win. So it's sort of a quid pro quo relationship with the people you're coaching. I'm going to work very hard to help you become better, and you're going to play very hard to help me win games. There comes a point where that is just not that meaningful anymore. And then you end up becoming more transformational. And that is a very important step to take if you want to genuinely become an elite coaching mentor. Because then, as soon as the athlete can sort out that you are even more concerned for their evolution as a human being, the athlete relationship with you is going to change in the most positive way. And so for me, fortunately, I stayed in the game long enough to have that sort of impact on some of the human beings I was coaching. And that is so much more satisfying, which is why when I actually talk about three different platforms, the first platform we talked about, the competitive cauldron. But the thing I stumbled in to relatively early was, initially I stumbled into this because I enjoy reading a lot. You'd read these business books about, cultures that transform a business into something extraordinary. And it has to do with a value system that the whole company sort of supports and drives towards. And a lot of that has to do with helping the people within the company to have a purpose beyond, just picking up a paycheck. So the thing that we've always considered very critical are our core values, how we conduct ourselves as human beings when you play for the University of North Carolina. And so for me, we have 13 different core values, which is the way we expect people to behave. And for me, what the athlete realizes eventually is, hey, he's really interested in helping me become the best version of myself. It's not just me becoming, a better soccer player. I can sense he really cares about me beyond the game. And for that to happen, you've got to really get to know your athletes. Have to get to know you, and you have to have a value system that puts a priority on the different things where you're trying to help them become better human beings. And then just to share with you what you and I were talking about originally, I gave a presentation to the Celtics last fall. And of course, they were the, reigning NBA champions. And so when the Celtics ask you to make a coaching presentation, it's pretty intimidating. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think I did a really good job for them in that presentation because I didn't emphasize the things that were most important. And then all of a sudden, because I did speak for them, they invited me up because they learned my grandson's favorite team was the Celtics. He's a 15-year-old boy. He's a tennis player in Greensboro. And so I flew up there with my wife and my grandson, and we're sitting there, and the GM of the Celtics, Brad Stevens, welcomes us to our seats. We're basically right on the floor, and we're right next to the tunnel that goes to the locker room. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I could see Lauren Cheney Holiday. Lauren Cheney was a top athlete graduating from high school in the United States one year, and I chased her and I lost her. I lost her to UCLA, where she met uh, Drew Holiday, and they ended up getting married. And she's a wonderful human being. I just really, really like her. And we connected, and she said, "Well, it's so good for you to be here. Why are you here?" I said, "Well, I'm here with my grandson, and he just loves everything about the Celtics." So she got a family pass for me, my grandson, and my wife. And all of a sudden, we're in the tunnel waiting to meet the Celtics right after they had beaten, coincidentally, the team from Charlotte in their last regular season game. The way those amazing athletes, some of the best, basketball players in the world, treated my grandson was transformational for me. And I realized, and I wrote a note to basically Brad Stevens to apologize for the fact I didn't talk about the right things in my presentation to the Celtics because, oh my gosh, they have an amazing culture. And so that's the other thing that has to happen. I think if all of us in coaching are doing the right job, and I'm speaking also directly to the young man that asked the question, you are basically connecting with people in the most positive way, and you're trying to change their lives for the better. I'm a member of a conservative church. And when they're training me to become a teacher in this church, a good friend of mine ended up teaching the class on teaching me how to become a teacher in my church. And he said the first principle in teaching Sunday school in our church is love those you teach. When I look back on all of the different coaching lessons I've learned in my life, that is the absolute most important lesson I've ever learned. When our kids go off to play pro, as I mentioned, they never listen to me. They have the dream of just going into the NWSL, even though, half the kids that we send into the NWSL can't play in their first couple of years. And so they're ignoring me as they go in. But when they go in, they end up calling me back and they're always complaining about this, that, and the other thing. And most of it has to do with the fact they're not playing. And I bite my tongue, I don't say, well, I told you so. But one of my kids said, and this is sort of a backhanded compliment, Anson, when I played for you, it was so hard. I thought I could play for anyone. And then she skipped a beat and she said, but through your criticism, I could feel your love. That is one of the greatest coaching compliments I've ever received in my life. If the kids can feel your love and affection for them and their evolution, you're going to become the most effective coach they can find. And so through whatever you're doing, because keep in mind, a lot of coaching is criticism because you're trying to get them to the next level. And they don't understand that criticism is actually a compliment. Because when some player that I've been, just harassing all week, I could sense the frustration in this player, and then I'll bring him into my office and I'm going to say, okay, listen, I know I am driving you crazy, but what do you think about Mary? Mary's basically the worst player on our team. How often do I say anything to Mary? And the kid says, you never say anything to Mary. I said, that's right. Do you know why I am doing nothing but nagging you for the entire practice? Because your potential is extraordinary. I love Mary. She will always be a part of my team. She does well academically. She treats everyone well. She represents the team well. You are the one that's going to win a gold medal in the Olympics or win a world championship. So I'm going to spend every second of every practice making sure that we are going to get you elevated as fast as possible. My wife is a former professional dancer. She told me that whenever she has some elite teacher giving a master class and she's in there, if the teacher doesn't give her a criticism during the class, she ends up crying after class because here's what she thinks. That teacher didn't think I was good enough to criticize. So, but through the criticism, every one of the athletes should feel your love. And a part of this construction is to construct their confidence as a human being. And this is really interesting. I'm very proud of this. I'm going to share this little piece of data. My winning percentage in the national championship final is a higher winning percentage than my winning percentage. How is that possible? Because in the national championship final, in theory, you're playing the best team in the country or the second best. How can my winning percentage in that game be greater than in general? Because the night before that championship game, I am writing a personal letter to every senior that I'm photocopying and reading to the team after I send the seniors out there in the field to have them play for their seniors that have been leading them for the last basically 3.5 years. Because I want every kid to make sure every one of my seniors goes out a winner. And every one of those seniors knows what I think of them as a human being. There's nothing in there, those letters about soccer. So I think what all of us have to do when we get involved in sport is to make sure it's just a conduit to teach a higher level of value. And so for me, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Well, that's really well said. And on that, I mean, we do have another question in the chat
Sure.
about some practices and games, and then we can kind of wrap it. But I really appreciate your time today, Anson.
Yeah, Jason, we don't have to wrap it. I
Okay.
enjoy talking about this stuff. I mean,
Oh, well, all right.
I'll
We'll
stay
keep
on
it
this
going.
call as long as someone's got a question.
Okay, cool. Let's go to the games versus practice. How important is it in your experience to play in frequent games versus times where you have practices without like regular games? Like how have you approached that, or like what do you how do you how do you value that, the game versus practice balance?
The most important thing for player development is practice, assuming it's a well-organized practice. In the course of a 90-minute game, the average player is touching the ball for 3 minutes. If you are spending 3 minutes of a game touching the ball, you're never going to develop into an elite player. So the most important thing you can do is attend a well-organized practice. And the modern practices, and I'm sure, Jason, you're going to run them this way. Every kid has a ball. One of the things I really loved about what happened in Holland about 5 or 6 years ago is the coaches used to come, I think, because this was mandated by the association in Holland for player development. He came with a counter and he would look at one player during practice. And obviously, he's not the only coach in practice. There are 3 or 4 coaches there, coaching this youth team. But every time this certain player touched the ball, he hit the counter. And what the Dutch Federation was telling these coaches that for a good youth practice at this level, and they would have the U8 standard, the U10 standard, the U12 standard, the U14 standard, the U16 standard. Basically, here are the number of touches a kid should have in the course of a practice. And then they got even more particular. Here are the number of times they should be shooting in this typical practice. Here are the number of times that they should be playing 1v1. Because it gets back to what I was saying earlier. You can develop yourself into an elite player by living on a wall and playing 1v1. And so what you've got to do is to touch the ball all the time. The nice thing about living on a wall is in the course of 10 minutes, you'll be shocked at how often you're touching the ball. Because when you shoot the ball up against the ball, that's one touch. But as the ball comes flying off the wall, your ability to control it is another touch. And if you touch it again in preparation for that shot for alternating feet, if you go left, right, left, right, left, right, there are all sorts of different things and games you can play on a wall that take you to a completely different level. But what's the value of the wall? Number of touches in a condensed period of time. What's the advantage of 1v1? First of all, it hits almost every platform of the game. It's exhausting, so there's a fitness component. Your ability to beat someone off the level, off the dribble is such a critical skill. That's another very important thing. But your ability to defend is also important. All these things are important. So the mentality you're developing, the fitness you're developing, the skill set you're developing in 1v1. And so what you want is you want to design training environments in practice that touch on everything. Your physical component, your technical component, your psychological component, which is your desire to win and impact, and then your tactical component. Can you make the right decision? And so practice for me is everything. So what they're considering now at a collegiate level, because right now 2 games a week is actually too many games because you don't have enough practice time. And I agree with that. So the men's game is trying to push through that you have a I guess, 2 seasons in men's collegiate soccer. You have a fall season and a spring season. And what do? You practice all week and you play 1 game on the weekend. The number of practice sessions you'll get, basically 5, because you're allowed 1 day off a week at a collegiate level. 5 practices and 1 game will be the best, I guess, mechanism for taking a player to an elite level. So games aren't the most important thing if you want to develop basically practices. Now, in the course of a practice, can you scrimmage? Yeah, absolutely. And that should be a part of, a lot of practices during the week. But the critical thing are ball touches and challenges. And so for me, practice has to be the priority.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying because a lot of youth structures are basically about making money. And I understand that completely. And yes, just like, with any sort of athletic hierarchy, there are teams at the top of the food chain that are getting the best coaches. But in order to structure a club for financial success, they need the teams underneath. But this gets back to what I think is most critical for a youth player. A youth player should certainly be attending the practices, but a youth player can also train on his or her own. And so for me, it's all about what you should be doing on your own if you want to become elite. At a collegiate level, in fact, I gave a talk on this recently. So let me read you this section of the talk. I'm asked every single year to speak to all the freshman athletes at the University of North Carolina. And so I take it seriously. So in this part of the talk, I'm talking about athletic character. Athletic character is basically, to summarize it really quickly, it's about having self-discipline, competitive fire, and self-belief. If you can have those 3 qualities, in other words, if you have the discipline to work, if you will compete, and if you believe in yourself, those are the fundamental platforms to become elite. Um, And I'm just going to read from my speech to get to the point I want to make with you. And if you don't choose these qualities and you struggle to get the playing time you want, and none of your athletic dreams come true, will you have the strength and nobility to take responsibility for the choices you have made and accept the consequences? So in this part of my talk,
He's the best soccer coach.
So what I'm trying to share with everyone is, if you really want to become extraordinary and you're not on the top team, there are other things you can do to get you to the top team. But if you're not willing to make these other choices, you're never going to get there. So here's the way I'm continuing that paragraph. And your poor choices might seem so benign at the time, like not pushing to failure in the weight room, cutting the time or distance in your summer fitness program, binging on Netflix one weekend when you could be working on your skill set. Or for my soccer players sitting out there in the room, and now I'm addressing them directly. In a Division One, college soccer coaches get 132 days a year to work with their players. And now I'm asking this directly of all of my players sitting in front of me. And keep in mind, they're not just my players, the whole frigging athletic department sitting in front of me that are freshman athletes on all the teams, football, basketball, baseball. I'm speaking to all of them. So here again, in Division One, college soccer coaches get 132 days a year to work with their players. What are you doing in the other 233 days? Do you love the ball or love the game enough to invest in your skill set? So basically, what is critical is if they're not at the top of the pyramid, are they willing to work to get there? Because if they're willing to work to get there, they can get there. Because holy cow, are there so many different things you can do to get to that level? And if you don't want to invest the time, you are never going to get there. So now it's a question of choice, because I can give any athlete the choices they have to make to get to the highest level. And then as we started this conversation earlier, Jason and I started this, and then we jumped in with this. I can't wait for the moment when the athlete has decided they want to become the best they can be. And I'm just waiting. I am waiting and waiting and waiting. And some athletes never make the choice. But if they never make the choice to become extraordinary, then they have to bear the consequences of not playing on the elite team, to play on the teams below that. And that's okay. Is there anything wrong with that? Of course not. But what they have to understand is they've chosen to be on that lower level team because there are things they can do to get to the promised land. And I'm just sitting there waiting, because these kids I bring in every year when I was recruiting, we were allowed to, in fact, this is hilarious. It's in the same speech I gave. I tell everyone that's sitting in front of me, the University of North Carolina allows me to recruit 5 kids a year. Here's the problem I've had with the 5 kids a year I recruit. One of them is better than I thought. 2 are about what I thought. 1 is worse than I thought. 1 is so bad they don't get on the field in 4 years. That gives me an only 60% hit rate. That's not a good recruiting percentage. That isn't good. Now, all 5 have extraordinary talent because we're in an amazing recruiting position. So what happened to those 2 that didn't really make it? Well, they decided not to do what they needed to do to become extraordinary. And so what I'm trying to convince these kids of, you've chosen to sit on the bench or never play or play on the lower level team because you haven't made the sacrifices to play on the higher level team. So if that's the case, is that okay? Yeah, that's okay. But you just don't get to play. You've chosen this, so be happy with it. Hopefully you do end up in, STEM research and you do end up curing cancer, because this is not your mission. And how do I know this is not your mission? Because I have trained so many that have gone to an elite level. I know what they've done. You haven't done any of that. And even though I've suggested this stuff to you, you still refuse to select it. And that's okay. It's okay. It's okay to be a recreational athlete. I'm a recreational athlete right now. I tore my hip labrum. I can't move anymore. I certainly can't move to my left. I play recreational sports. But if you still have all of your pieces and you're not 74 and you can still change directions, yeah, you want to be the best you can be, I can help you get there. Here's what you got to do. Bang, bang, bang. So the best aspect of the evolution of the women's game has been watching their skill sets get better and better and better. In fact, I'll be completely honest. Jessica Berman in the NWSL, she's the commissioner of the league. She has done an absolutely fabulous job. I've been watching the teams in the NWSL get better and better and better every year. And I've been watching them this year. I can't believe the level of the game at a pro level in the United States. And the cool thing as well is seeing all of my kids on the field. Avery Patterson just got her first cap for the U.S. full team right after Sentinor. Not only got her first cap, but then scored a couple goals when she started. I mean, gosh, our kids are doing great. And I bet the GM of Seattle that after she stole Maddie Darlene, because Darlene had another year left, I bet the GM that she wasn't going to start there. I was so pissed at the GM of Seattle for stealing my kid. I bet her. And I said, next time we meet, I don't care what city we're in, um, unless she starts over half the games, um, you're going to buy me a dinner. And I'm going to find the most expensive, restaurant in the town we're in for you to pay me for this dinner. And then all of a sudden, she's been starting her every game. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I think I'll have to go to Montana to find a restaurant cheap enough so I don't have to mortgage the home because I'm going to lose this bet. That's the area in the women's game that's starting to jump. The highest levels of the game are really high levels, and I'm watching Emma Hayes coach. She's the coach of the U.S. Women's National Team. I love Emma. I had Emma as a student way back in the day. She wrote a book, and she put me in the book and said the nicest things about me. I really appreciated that. But Emma's doing a good job too, because the only thing I like about her, she's not afraid of losing. And the thing that's really cool about watching her teams play, in the last game she played, I think most of the kids in the field had less than 5 caps. And she's playing against a team she played in the Olympic final with players that have less than 5 caps. Now, a couple of them were mine, like the Sisneros and the Pattersons with less than 5 caps. But I just love how brave she is. She doesn't care. And this is another thing I want to share with anyone that's still on the call. Uh, don't worry if your kids fail in sport. It is one of the last bastions of where if you fail, it's not going to really do any serious damage. All failure is for you in any sport you play is, you haven't trained hard enough. And the one quality we all seem to be losing is resilience. Because, oh my gosh, are we becoming so fragile we can't lose anymore or fail? That's another extraordinary quality in sports. Is one of my favorite stories of all time is one of my kids, Danielle Egan, who's now Reina, was in Europe with Clive Charles, playing on the U20 national youth team one year. And this is back when we never lost a game. We would just beat everyone to death. And Danielle was on some of those teams. And all of a sudden, I get a call from Clive Charles. And they've just come back from Europe and they played the Dutch. And apparently they lost to the Dutch. And Clive, who was just winding up our kid, walked up to Danielle Egan and said, Danielle, what does it feel to finally lose a game? Because, of course, with us, she never lost. And apparently, and Clive tells the story very well, Danielle looks at him with steely eyes and says, Coach, at the University of North Carolina, we lose every single day. And she was absolutely right. In the competitive cauldron, no one's at the top of every list. You lose constantly. And so one of the best things about athletics, in my opinion, is your ability to lose and come back the next day to try to win. And if you lose again, you come back the next day to try to win. And so I think athletics still has something significant to contribute to basically the development of our kids. Because right now we have this attitude that we want to build their self-esteem. And so we're so afraid to allow them to fail in anything. No, let them fail. And then they get to decide who they are. Yeah, you want to wallow in self-pity? Go ahead. But no, that's not going to serve those kids well. No, they've got to fail on a consistent basis because then they get to sort out who the heck they are. Because right now the kids coming in are too fragile. And I'll share this story and we can certainly finish with this, but I think it's a really important one, certainly for all the parents on the call. One of the wonderful things about working at the University of North Carolina is we have access to some extraordinary scholars. And in 2012, my athletic director brought in the preeminent sociologist on campus at UNC to speak to all the coaches. And he comes in, I'll be honest with you, I can't remember everything he said, but I will never forget the first 2 slides. The first slide, and the reason I won't forget this, the date on the slide was basically 1969. That was the year I graduated from high school. On the slide is this kid's coming home from school with all F's on his report card. And in the slide, you see the parents screaming at the kid. Then the date jumped to the year he was giving the lecture, which was 2012. The kid again's coming home from school in 2012 with all F's on his report card, and the parents are screaming at the teacher. What's happening now in the way we raise our kids is apparently they can't make mistakes anymore because their parents are protecting them from the possibility that they're not as great as they think they are. And so for me, that's a very important lesson for all of us to learn as we're raising our kids. Allow your kid to fail. Allow them to fail. Don't protect them from standards and responsibility. What's critical is to suffer. Because basically, if in the self-esteem movement where, everyone gets a trophy, we're telling them the wrong things. We're not giving them standards, and we're trying to protect them from pain and accountability. And both of those things have value. There's a reason we experience pain. We experience pain because it tells you no or stop. And it's an incredible lesson. And we shouldn't protect our kids from pain and accountability. And so, and he's right. Oh my gosh. I mean, every kid we recruit is not just the best player on every team they came from. Some of them are the best player in the state they came from. If we do well in recruiting, sometimes they're the best player east of the Mississippi or west of the Mississippi. And gosh, if Stanford fell asleep on this kid, sometimes they're the best player in the country because we end up with them and Stanford doesn't. And so these kids coming in, they're in an environment where they are surrounded by elite athletes. And so it's not a question of talent anymore. It's a question of decision. It's a question of basically Carol Dweck. How hard are you going to work? You want to play? You got to work. Are you the fittest? And we will certify their fitness. There'll be a ranking. Are you the fastest? We'll certify that. Do you have the best vertical jump? We will certify that. Are you the most agile? Do you have the best shot? We will certify that. We will certify everything. And they're going to look at it and they're going to decide, well, guess what? As Danielle Egan said, yep, she lost every day. But while she was losing every day, she won 4 national championships. And that's what we try to do with our kids. If you are willing to work yourself to death and compete like there's no tomorrow, if you will have self-discipline, if you will have competitive fire, if you will have self-belief because you've worked so hard, it's amazing what you can do with your life. But trust me, failure is going to be a part of it because you're going to fail every day if you play for me. And if I don't say anything to you, just start crying after practice because here's what I've learned. Average players want to be left alone. Good players want to be coached. Great players want the truth. And so I'm here to tell you the truth. And if you're willing to work, I'm going to get you to whatever level that you are willing to commit yourself to.
Thank you everyone for being part of this. Anson, it's so awesome to have you here and just appreciate everything you've done and all that I've learned from you. And I'm really happy to be on this journey and look forward to having many more conversations about how I can continue to learn and grow and help people in the sport of soccer. So thank you so much.
Well, anytime. So if you want to do this again in the next couple months, feel free, Jason. I'm just playing pickleball and I'm reading books. I've got time.
Hey, that's good. And I got a spot for you at the field anytime you come down. I'm gonna get you out. So come check out some trainings and give me your thoughts. And I know I'll always be leaning on you a little bit. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.